term, we've got to extend that 3.4% interest rate. Long term, we need to make certain that every kid in this country, regardless of income, can go to college and leave school without a crushing financial debt. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, I'm here today on the immigration bill, but I want to thank the senator from Vermont for bringing our attention to this very serious issue. And it's a little bit of a variation on a theme today about trying to reconnect the priorities of the American people, frankly, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or anybody else, and this place, which has become totally disconnected. And I just want to say through the chair to the senator from Vermont how on point he is. You know what the people that I represent care about? I was talking about this a little bit earlier. Care about the fact that they're living in an economy that even when it grows is not producing sufficient jobs and is not driving income up. That's what they're concerned about. And the student debt crisis that the senator talks about, where it tripled over the last 10 years, is a huge part of this story. It's a significant part. Because if your family's income is going down, but your cost of higher ed is skyrocketing, and by the way, at the same time your cost of health care is skyrocketing, it makes it really hard to get ahead. People are worried, desperately worried. They said earlier that we're going to be the first generation of Americans to leave less opportunity, not more, to our kids and to our grandkids. But there's another issue here as well, which is today in the United States, in the 21st century, in this country, if you are born and you are living in poverty, your chances of getting a college degree or the equivalent of a college degree are 9 in 100. 9 in 100. For the folks in the chamber, for the pages that are here today, we have 100 chairs, 100 desks in the United States Senate. If these desks represented 4 children living in this country instead of senators, those 4 desks in the front row at that end right there, those 4 and another one, those are the only folks who would be getting a college degree. 91 other people in this chamber would be constrained to the margin of this economy and the margin of the democracy from the outset. And matters are getting worse, not better. We led the world in the production of college graduates when George Bush, the son, this is not a partisan observation, it's a temporal one, when George Bush, the son, became president. We led the world. The young people that are here today, let me tell you, 13 years later, we are 16th in the world in the production of college graduates. And because of our inability to come together and figure out how to deal comprehensively over time in a thoughtful way with the fact that we don't want to stick our kids with this debt that we have acquired, which we need to do, we are just hacking away at domestic discretionary spending for higher education, for K-12 education, for agriculture, for infrastructure. Some of these budgets that we've considered, we haven't passed them here, they passed them over in the House, that would invest only 4% of our revenue, of the 4% of the revenue we collect in the future of this country. 96% is something else, is not going to get the job done. And I think on an issue like this, where our students are saying, how do you at least not make matters worse, we ought to be able to come together in a bipartisan way and solve this problem. So I thank the senator from Vermont for coming to the floor to focus our attention on something that the American people actually care about. Thank you. Thank you. With that, I yield the floor.
The room.
Mr. Alexander.
Senator from Iowa.
I ask that the calling of the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
I want to give my colleagues a point of view on the immigration bill before the United States Senate from somebody other than a United States senator. In the weekend Des Moines Register, there was an article called Another View, Immigration Reforms Adds Disorder to a Failing System, by Mark H. Metcalf, who had been an immigration judge, now a county attorney in the country of, or in the state of Kentucky. So I'm quoting, "The most recent push for immigration reform is compelling. True to our heritage of inclusion, it succeeds. Faults, true according to our heritage, it succeeds. False to our tradition of the rule of law, it fails. For any law to forge consensus, it must appeal to both fairness and common sense. The measure now on the United States Senate floor fails this litmus. What is sold as a means to simplify and dignify one of our most important national institutions, immigration and naturalization, mandates complexity and much of the same disorder that got us where we are today. The bill's neglect of an effective court system only aggregates the disorder. America's immigration courts are weak, and this latest measure keeps them that way. Put simply, immigration courts cannot impose order. Few aliens ordered removed after years of litigation are ever deported. Edward Grant, a senior immigration appeals judge, noted this impasse in 2006, and then he quotes Edward Grant, "All should be troubled that only a small fraction of deportation orders is actually executed," end of quote. And he was right. A 2003 Justice Department report found only 3% of aliens free during trial were actually removed after courts ruled against them. Those who deserve relief fare just as poorly. By last count, more than 330,000 cases were backlogged. This historic dysfunction offers a glimpse of things to come if the current version of reform passes. The cause of this dysfunction is simple. Immigration courts have no authority over immigration enforcement agencies, unlike federal district courts that have U.S. Marshals, among others, to execute their orders. Federal immigration courts have no such muscle. Numbers tell the story. Some 11 million illegal aliens now live in the United States. Visa overstays, those who entered America legally and then refused to leave, comprise 40% of this total. The rest crossed unguarded borders and entered illegally. Both groups brought children with them. From these two populations, 1 and 2 million deportation orders remain unexecuted. The immigration courts observed this dysfunction firsthand. From 1996 through 2012, the U.S. permitted some 2 2/10 million aliens to remain free before trial. Nearly 900,000 of these individuals, 39% of the total, skipped court and disappeared. In the shadow of 9/11, things were even worse. From 2002 through 2006, half of all aliens free awaiting trial vanished. Nothing in the details now being debated addresses this systemic defect, and continued neglect will only dismiss public support for worthy individuals intended to elevate the foreign-born. Fine improvements dot the present legislation. Enhancements that protect lawful American workers, recruitment of the highly skilled into our tech-driven economy, and real-time tracking of visa holders into and out of ports of entry provide overdue fixes. Emphasis upon border security demonstrates a seriousness absent from earlier proposals. Those illegally brought to the United States as children, better known as dreamers, earn tracks to citizenship incentivized through higher education and military service. Now, there's let me editorialize here. There's 2 paragraphs where he says good things about this legislation. I don't necessarily agree with a couple of those points. Now, continuing to quote, some reworking is needed, but this value-added approach appeals to our better instinct as a nation. Problems persist, though, in that essential mechanisms upon which a rule of law nation depends, effective courts. While the bill authorizes 225 new judges, judicial authority declines. Deportation orders are further enfeebled. Aliens deported from the United States may apply to come back, and the thousands who skipped court can request a waiver and get in line with many who played by the rules. Fraud is enabled. Courts and immigration agencies alike will be required to accept, without independent verification, aliens' claims to work and residency that makes them eligible for a path to citizenship. Constitutional protections are turned upside down. Here I editorialize. Listen to this, of how our laws are turned upside down. Continuing to quote, aliens in civil deportation proceedings will receive counsel on demand, while citizens receive counsel only when facing criminal charges and only after proving they're indigent. So, beginning to editorialize, it gives more constitutional rights and more legal than a common criminal in this country might get. Order is subverted. Even felons who are subject to deportation may seek injunctions that allow them to remain in the United States. In the end, courts that spend years deciding the cases of those who should be removed will see their orders overturned by waivers that mock the judicial process. America's immigration courts express fundamental confidence in those who embrace our shores and the redemptive power of our democracy. For the immigrant in particular, they reveal the beginnings of accountability that are surely of our exceptionalism, but ignored by administrations, both Republican and Democrat. These courts have ceased to do the critical work for which they were created, to definitively decide the claims of those who ask to join our nation and see that those decisions are impartially enforced. So now, instead of debating how we extend the great prize of American citizenship to more of the world's bright and talented, Congress argues whether felons should be deported. This is the small ball politics that has sabotaged public confidence in immigration. It shows how far we have fallen, both in the mission of these special courts and with immigration in general. Courts without authority cannot provide order, even less than they can assure liberty. Only independence and empowered courts are an equal match for the certain risk and superior opportunities that American immigration offers. History proves them not just a priceless check against tyranny, but also an effective antidote for drifting government agencies that delay relief to the deserving and deny sanctions to the offender. Such courts are necessary complements to immigration reform that is inclusive, accountable, and commands consensus. End of the article in the Des Moines Register by this former immigration judge, Mark H. Metcalf. I thank my colleagues for listening to this, and I yield the floor. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Nevada.
Thank you. Mr. President, I rise today to discuss Senate Bill 744, the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. From the very beginning of this debate, I have said that our nation needs immigration reform. I've also urged Senate leadership to ensure that the Senate has ample opportunity to debate this bill, amend it, and take the hard votes necessary to make the bill as good as it can be. To ignore this problem and to do nothing to change the status quo would be a disservice to the American people and a great detriment to our country. I've also said throughout this process that in order to enact meaningful, comprehensive immigration reform, we have to strengthen border security. It's true that the border security portion of the underlying bill needs significant improvement. And through the hard work and negotiations led by my colleagues, Senator Hoeven, Senator Corker, the border security portion of this legislation has been addressed. And for that reason, I can support this bill. The Hoeven-Corker amendment, which I co-sponsored, adds 20,000 additional Border Patrol agents to the southern border. It requires twice the original amount of fencing along the border, 700 miles total to be exact, and requires the Department of Homeland Security to implement a border fencing strategy to help ensure the fence is an effective deterrent. It also mandates the E-Verify system to be fully implemented before any registered provisional immigrant can adjust their status. This will help make sure that businesses have safe and legal workforce. And the amendment requires an electronic entry-exit system to all international air and seaports of entry where U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers are currently deployed. By increasing and enhancing security efforts at our borders, by using new technology that will allow us to better monitor activities at our borders, we will ensure that those that are here lawfully and that they have the opportunity to thrive and succeed just like many generations of American immigrants have done. To do nothing now amounts to de facto amnesty for 11 million people who are already here illegally. We must take action to prevent further unlawful entry. The current system is backwards and it's broken. This legislation represents a product of many long hours of debate, discussion, and deliberation in this body. It addresses a problem in our country that requires dramatic change and meaningful reform. While this bill is just one step in the process, it is a step in the right direction. It takes into consideration the necessity of securing America's borders while encouraging the lawful immigration of those who come or would come to our shores to contribute to America's greatness, as immigrants have done since our nation's founding. In the past, attempts to reform our immigration system failed due to a process that was neither transparent nor fair. But from the Judiciary Committee proceedings to today, the Senate has had ample opportunity to debate this legislation and amend it. As a result, we have a bill where the good far outweighs the bad. With this legislation, we can address the 11 million undocumented individuals living in the country under de facto amnesty. We can finally secure our borders and stop more people from living here illegally. And we can fix a system that has been broken for decades once and for all. We can continue to maintain the smartest, hardest working, most creative workforce in the world. Fighting for what you believe in and working with members from both sides of the aisle does not mean you're turning your back on your principles. Democrats and Republicans can find ways to work together and pass legislation that this great nation deserves. Republicans can do so and still stay true to their conservative principles. No question, this has been a contentious debate. My constituents feel strongly about this issue on both sides of the spectrum. Some reporters in Nevada like to harp on the fact that my work to find a solution between Democrats and Republicans has been politically motivated. One such reporter even retorted to describing my actions in racially insensitive terms. The bottom line, the easy thing to do politically is nothing. The harder choice is to govern. We must remember that long before America was the great nation that we are today, before we were the world's greatest economy, a military superpower, a global champion for democracy that has forever changed human history, America was merely an idea. America began as an idea in the hearts and minds of a persecuted minority that longed for freedom and the opportunity to decide for themselves what their destiny would be. That idea was brought here by immigrants who crossed the oceans and devoted themselves to the formation of a free society unlike any world had ever known. America has always been a nation of immigrants, and that heritage is one of the defining aspects of our national success story. Mr. President, when I think about a true American immigrant success story, I think about one of my constituents back home, Mr. Carlos Piera. Carlos came to America from Peru in the 1990s. He and his wife, Kathia, set out to build their very own bakery. But they wanted to build more than a bakery. They wanted to build a new life for themselves and for their children. And they did just that. They built a bakery with their bare hands. They laid the bricks and hammered the nails, and after a lot of long nights and hard work, they built Bond Breads in Las Vegas. Today, their company is a world-renowned, internationally respected enterprise. And their products are used by chefs and restaurants all over the world. Bond Breads is responsible for creating hundreds of jobs in Nevada and is a perfect example of what our immigration system should encourage. Carlos's hard work, dedication, perseverance allowed him and his business to succeed in a way that would be impossible in many other countries today. And I have 3 naturalized citizens on my staff about whom I can say the exact same thing. That's a true immigrant success story. That's the kind of potential we can unlock by fixing what's broken with our current system. We can improve our economy, create jobs, and strengthen our nation as a whole with this immigration reform bill. Or we can choose to protect the status quo, do nothing to fix the overall problem. Mr. President, this bill is a step forward towards much-needed reform to our immigration system. It is true to the American idea that has defined our nation since its founding, the idea that is inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, welcoming the tired, the poor, and the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice made a profound statement recently that in America it doesn't matter where you came from. It only matters where you are going. Our immigration laws should embody that principle and enable good, hardworking people to come here, study hard, start businesses, raise families, and contribute as productive citizens. The bill before us is a good step towards preserving that idea. And so I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this immigration reform bill. Mr. President, thank you. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
The senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that after the senator from Massachusetts makes his remarks, that Senator Grassley be recognized and I be recognized after him, and then Senator Kaine, and those 4 in that order.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President,
The senator from Colorado.
I know the senator from Massachusetts is here. I look forward to hearing his farewell. But before he goes, I just wanted to say thank you to the senator from Nevada for his work on this bill, for getting us to a bipartisan result here, for helping us grow the vote, and for the statement that he made about there surely not one of us would have written the bill exactly the way that it's written, but there is much more that's good about this bill than not, and I am grateful for his support. Thank you.
Mr. President,
The senator from Massachusetts.
I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 15 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today in my final full work week and not yet 150 days into my Senate career, yet at the precipice of the close of that career. On January 30th of this year, Governor Deval Patrick sent me to this chamber to represent the people of Massachusetts and their interests. Yesterday, on June 25th, those same people took to the voting booths and called me home. And in doing so, they called Senator-elect Ed Markey to the high honor of serving in this august body. After 37 distinguished years in the House, Senator-elect Markey now has the opportunity to offer his voice, wisdom, accumulated experiences, humor, esprit de corps, and tireless commitment to justice and equality to the United States Senate. And I, for one, believe that Massachusetts and the country will be better for it. Like the majority of Massachusetts voters who expressed themselves yesterday, I am quite confident that Senator-elect Markey will serve with distinction and act in the best interests of the citizens he is now privileged to represent. And the Senator-elect bested a strong candidate who brought a new voice and, yes, a new visage to the Massachusetts political scene. I applaud Gabriel Gomez on a well-run campaign, and most importantly, his willingness to sacrifice so much in an effort to serve the people of the Commonwealth. He started this journey as a relative unknown, but I suspect we have not heard the last of Mr. Gomez. I thank him and his family for their sacrifices and their willingness to engage. Mr. President, when it comes to farewell speeches, few will top the words offered by John Kerry on this floor a few months ago. After 28 years of distinguished service to the people of Massachusetts, now Secretary Kerry spent nearly an hour reflecting on his service to this body. By the same measure, Mr. President, as merely an interim senator serving but a few short months, I probably should have ended my remarks about 45 seconds ago. But before I yield, Mr. President, I will take a few minutes to reflect on my brief time in this body and extend my gratitude to a number of folks. First, I want to acknowledge and recognize the outstanding staff members in Boston and D.C. who have helped me serve our constituents to the best of my ability. When Governor Patrick named me as interim senator, a few people, okay, more than a few, openly questioned whether I would be up to the task and whether I was capable of accomplishing anything other than locating the lavatory during my temporary assignment. But I knew something those doubters did not know. I knew I was going to be able to do my best for the folks back home because I came to the Senate armed with the knowledge of the issues by dint of my time in the Patrick Murray administration, and I plan to make a few key hires and convince the bulk of Secretary Kerry's Senate staff to stay on and help me do the job the governor sent me to do. In other words, I knew what I didn't know, but I knew enough to hire the people who knew the considerable rest. And boy, have they proven me a genius. If you work in the Senate but a day, and I suspect the same is true in the House of Representatives, you will learn quickly that staff make this place hum, and good staff make all the difference in the world. I hope my team will forgive me if I do not list them all by name, thereby avoiding the sin of omission. But instead, all of the staff will accept my heartfelt appreciation for their willingness to join my team, show me the ropes, teach a new dog some old tricks, educate me on all the rules that matter, which seem to be written nowhere, and their exhibition of degrees of professionalism and service to our country that the public too often thinks is missing in their Congress. To my entire staff, I have been in awe at your greatness, and I am forever in your debt for your immeasurable contributions to our work in the interest of Massachusetts residents. And I look forward to your many successes yet to come. And to two of my team in particular, Val Young, my Chief of Staff, and Lauren Rich, my scheduler, who have known and worked with me for years, thank you for your continued willingness to partner with and trust in me. And if I am being honest, Mr. President, about the people who helped me look like I belonged here, I must spend a moment or two acknowledging the wonderful women and men who comprise the Senate staff. From the Capitol Police, who protect us every day and somehow knew my name on the first day, to the subway operators who always deliver us on time and unfazed, to the elevator operators who excel in the art of cutting off reporters and annoying questions, to the cloakroom staff who field every cloying call about voting schedules and presiding hours, to the clerks and parliamentarians who discreetly tell you what to say and do as presiding officer while the public in the gallery silently wonders why everyone addresses you as Mr. or Madam President while sitting in that chair. To the generous food service staff who look the other way when you go back for seconds and sometimes thirds. And to so many others who are the oil that makes this engine hum. Each of you has shown me such patience, support, and grace that I know your love for this institution may trump even the members' affections for this place and will sustain the institution long after any one or all of us leave this chamber. You are tremendous resources for every new senator, and I suspect great comfort to even the longest serving among us. The public may not know you by name or know the importance of your work, but now I do, and I have been honored to serve with you. The next folks I recognize are the youngest and most silent among us. Of course, I speak of the Pages, the young women and men who spend part of a high school year dressed and acting in the formal traditions of this body. I have yet to speak with an uninteresting page or a page uninterested in the Senate in our government. These are dynamic young people who could be doing so many different things with their time, but they give their time and service to the Senate and its members, and they are indispensable to both. I look forward to the day when my young boys will be of age to follow in the footsteps of these outstanding young people. Last and by no means least, I want to thank the many family and friends who supported my family and me during my short tenure. We often say that it takes a village to raise a child, but I can attest that it also takes a village to help an interim senator meet his duties in Congress and at home. Whether offering me a spare bedroom in Silver Springs or agreeing to last-minute babysitting duties so my wife and I both could celebrate Black History Month at the White House, our village is vast and generous. And of course, every village needs a queen, and the queen of my village is my wife, Stacey. I was able to serve because she was willing to be mom and dad and sacrifice in ways known and unknown while I have been in D.C. Over the past few months, I've missed many homework assignments, some birthday dinners, pediatric appointments, school performances, and parent-teacher meetings. But our sons never felt that their dad was absent and unaccounted for because their mom, a supermom, more than made up for my absence. Stacey has been my rock and salvation for nearly 20 years now, and I am better every day for it. And let the Senate record show for now and all time my love and dedication to Stacey. Mr. President, in January of this year, I plan to leave Deval Patrick's administration and transition back into private life. I was looking forward to more conventional hours, a reprieve from working under the public scrutiny of the press, and to spending more time with my wife and our young sons. So, I came to the United States Senate. Go figure. I was surprised but deeply honored when Governor Patrick sent me here to represent the folks back home. And I am eternally grateful for the governor's faith and trust in my ability to serve. This floor on which I stand today and with which I have become so closely acquainted over the past 5 months has been occupied by some of the most dynamic and greatest political figures of our nation's history. From my own state of Massachusetts alone, names like Adams, Webster, Sumner, Saltonstall, Brooke, Kennedy, all who have held a seat in the chamber before me are enough to make any person feel daunted when assuming a desk on this floor. And I was appointed to the Senate to fill the seat of another great senator, John Kerry, and work alongside another great senator, Elizabeth Warren. Thank you for being here, Elizabeth. With my work here, though my time was short, I sought to uphold not only Secretary Kerry's legacy in this body, but the work of all those esteemed senators who have dedicated their service to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I pledged to be the best partner I could with Senator Warren. I entered the Senate at a vexing time in this body's history. As we all know, congressional approval levels are dismally low. People across the nation and political pundits everywhere believe that partisanship is a bridge too wide to divide, a divide too wide to bridge, and a wall too high to overcome. Yet despite the overwhelming public pessimism, I came to Washington with 2 achievable objectives. to serve the people of Massachusetts to the best of my ability, and to work with any senator willing to implement smart, sensible, and productive policy to advance the ideals of our nation. From the outside, the prospects for bipartisanship may seem slim. Party line votes are the norm. The threat of the filibuster demands a supermajority to pass meaningful legislation. And the American people have come to believe Congress is more committed to obstruction than compromise. To the everyday observer, we have reached a standstill where partisanship outweighs progress, and neither side is willing to reach across the aisle for the good of the American people. But what I have encountered in the Senate is not a body defined by vitriol, but one more defined by congeniality and common respect. And that began before I even started here, Mr. President. On the day the governor announced my appointment, I was pleasantly surprised to receive calls on my personal cell phone, still don't know how they got those numbers, from Senators King, Hagan, and Cardin. And I had the pleasure of receiving warm welcomes from Majority Leader Reid and Republican Leader McConnell, among so many others, on that first day. One of the first persons to congratulate me after Senator Warren and Secretary Kerry escorted me for my swearing-in was my colleague from across the aisle, Senator Tim Scott. Since then, Senator Rand Paul and I have recounted our days at Duke and our affection for college basketball. On a bipartisan congressional delegation to the Middle East, I traded life stories and perspectives with Senators Klobuchar and Hoeven and discussed the comedic genius of Will Ferrell with Senators Gillibrand and Graham. Senator Portman stopped by my Commonwealth Coffee last week to wish me well as I lead the Senate and encourage me every day during my time here. Senator Burr, my next-door neighbor in the Russell Building, has always been good to remind me that I came from North Carolina before I had the privilege to serve in Massachusetts. Senator McCain invited me to co-sponsor my first Senate resolution, and Senator Manchin has shown me more kindness than I can count. The freshman senators on both sides welcomed me to their class and offered never-ending encouragement. And indeed, one of them, Heidi Heitkamp, has become the North Dakota sister I never knew I had. I wish I had time to recount every kindness each of the other 99, including the late Senator Lautenberg, gifted me while here, but I don't. But each has been recorded indelibly in my memory and is returned with gratitude. In April, I experienced the very best of this body's character in the wake of the Boston Marathon bombings, when members from every corner of this nation extended their sympathies, their prayers, and pledged their assistance and support to the city of Boston and to all those affected by that tragedy. In the aftermath, we all came together as Americans to honor those killed and to support the wounded during their time of recovery. And we saw the same in the wake of the terrible tornadoes that swept through Oklahoma. Upon closer inspection, it is clear that all of us here have common bonds and share similar goals. If only we are willing to seek out those bonds and focus on the goals that are in the best interest of our nation. While we may not agree on every policy, every line item, or every vote, we have each embraced the role of public servant, committed to improving the country we have pledged to support and defend. And as I have discovered in my time here, there is more opportunity for cooperation than the American public might believe. And this cooperation has led to some noted successes. Thanks to the bipartisan work in the Agricultural Committee and on the Senate floor, we were able to send a farm bill to the House. Through the joint leadership of the so-called Gang of Eight, we are debating right now a workable approach to comprehensive immigration reform. We have confirmed 5 cabinet secretaries. And in what will remain the most memorable all-nighter of my Senate career, through a marathon session and more votes in one night than most interim senators have in a career, the Senate passed the budget. And now we anxiously await the urgent opportunity to conference with the House. I have seen progress, and I remain a true believer in the democratic process, the core functionality of our government endowed to us by our founding fathers so many decades ago. And I remain a true believer in our system of government and the Senate's role in that system. If I have been asked any question more frequently than, what are you going to do next, Mo? It has been, is our system of government broken? Is Congress broken? And I have answered truthfully each time, no. Our system of government is the greatest ever known and the best example of democracy in human history. The genius of our founding fathers is on display every day on Capitol Hill, in every state capitol, and every city or town hall across this nation. And part of the founders' genius was the birth of a government designed to function as the people need it to, but function only as effectively as the privileged few empowered to work within it want it to work. Or, as Secretary Kerry himself said, when he said it best a few months ago right on this floor, and I quote, "I do not believe the Senate is broken. There is nothing wrong with the Senate that can't be fixed by what's right with the Senate." The predominant and weighty notion that 100 American citizens, chosen by their neighbors, or their governor in my case, to serve from states as different as Massachusetts to Montana, can always choose to put parochial or personal interests aside and find the national interest. What an awesome responsibility and privilege. And in my scant 5 months, I have seen the promise of those words realized in more ways and in more interactions than the public, unfortunately, has had occasion to witness. So I believe in that unlimited promise still. I have also been part of history while I was here. With my appointment, and coincidence with the appointment of Senator Scott, 2 African Americans are serving in this body concurrently for the first time in our nation's history. Senator Scott and I are, respectively, the 7th and 8th black senators to serve in this body. While I believe this number to be far too few, I am also hopeful that it is a sign that these United States will soon be represented by a more diverse population that more closely reflects the diverse country that we are and the diversity of opinions that exist across and within our diverse nation. With different perspectives, different backgrounds, different races, religions, and creeds, we are better equipped to confront the issues that faced our vast and changing nation. America has been and always will be a nation of immigrants, where religious freedom is in our DNA, where more and more we are chipping away at the barriers preventing us from achieving true marriage equality, and where people worldwide still yearn to reach our shores to enjoy our freedoms. And a Congress that is more reflective of this America, as this Congress is becoming, will be good for America. Finally, Mr. President, I offer my heartfelt gratitude to the people of Massachusetts. Not one person was given a chance to vote for or against me, but I have gone about my work every day as if they had. I came to this body beholden to Massachusetts, her residents, and the country only, and leave confident that I have stayed true to that honor. And ladies and gentlemen of the Commonwealth, it has been a true honor and privilege to represent you as your junior senator in the United States Senate. With that, Mr. President, and for what likely will be the final time, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Mr. President. Mr. President. Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I will be brief. I appreciate very much the remarks of Senator Cohen. The only thing he said that I disagree with is no one had a chance to vote on him to get here. There was one big vote that was very important, a man by the name of Deval Patrick. And once he made that decision, you were our senator as well as you were the senator of Massachusetts. Mr. President, I, of course, know Deval Patrick. We all saw him at the convention giving this brilliant speech. And he was swarmed with people giving him advice as to who he should select to replace Senator Kerry. But he called me and said, don't worry about it. I'm going to select the best person from the state of Massachusetts to represent Senator Kerry for the interim. And he was right. And I have told Governor Patrick on the telephone, and a couple of weeks ago I said, you make sure that you call Governor Patrick for me, because I know that they're good friends, and you tell him that I told you to tell him how much we all admire you. In the Democratic caucus yesterday, this good man didn't get one standing ovation, he got 2. That's rare. And he got that because he's a genuine person. He came here just now and talked about the goodness of this body. We need more of that. So, Senator Cohen, thank you very much. I admire you, and I know in the paper today you said that you're always going to be Mo. But to me, you're always going to be Senator Cohen.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, for 4 months I've had the privilege...
Mr. President,
Senator
if
from
you would
Oklahoma.
interrupt for a parliamentary inquiry.
Certainly.
Yes, Mr. President, first of all, we are operating under a unanimous consent request, and I would ask if we can modify that to hear from the senator from Massachusetts and then revert back to the unanimous consent request that has been granted.
Without objection.
I thank the senator from Oklahoma. Thank you. I will be brief. Mr. President, for 4 months I've had the privilege of serving alongside my good friend Mo Cowan in the Senate. From the time he was sworn in, Mo hit the ground running. Even though his time here was short, Mo has been a committed and strong advocate for the people of Massachusetts here in Washington. As a former chief of staff to Governor Patrick, Mo brought to the Senate a deep knowledge of issues facing our Commonwealth. Through his committee work and his outreach to his constituents, his careful consideration of important national issues, he has worked tirelessly to ensure that the interests of the people of Massachusetts are well represented and the people of America are well served. He has built great relationships and earned the respect of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I very much enjoyed getting to know Mo's wonderful family, his smart, talented, and patient wife, Stacy, their 2 young boys. I'm sure Grant and Miles are looking forward to having their dad closer to home again. Mo has been a dedicated public servant, and his time in the Senate only adds to his fine record of service on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth. It has been an honor to work together with Mo, fighting for Massachusetts families, and I wish him and I wish his family the very best. It has been an honor to be a partner of Senator Cowan in the United States Senate. Thank you, Mo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
The senator from Oklahoma.
Okay. Mr. President, we had a unanimous consent request. Senator Grassley was going to be going next, and I will go ahead and take his time. And the unanimous consent request was that I be recognized as if in morning business for such time as I shall consume. Thank you, Mr. President. Let me share a couple of things. First of all, I am looking forward to serving with the senator who was just elected yesterday, and I think he'll find out something that I found out when I was first elected to the United States Senate after serving for several years in the House of Representatives, and that is it is a more civil place. It's a place where we can have differences of opinion, where we disagree with each other, but do so in a very friendly way. And I am actually looking forward to that because there have been times when our discourse, our discussion with each other was not friendly. But I think that it will turn out to be a total change, and I just want to get on record and say that I'm looking forward to serving with our newly elected senator from Massachusetts, and I look forward to being with him, although I think he has every reason to, opportunity to change his mind on some of the positions he's taken in the past. Let me just share something I didn't see when I had the floor yesterday and was talking a little bit about President Obama's talk. There are 4 things that I didn't hear, and I'm going to repeat them. These are statements that were made by President Obama talking about before an audience. And, you know, I have to say, I really believe I know the reason for this long talk that he gave yesterday, because he had served for 4 years. He knew that his far-left base was demanding some type of cap-and-trade, and he knew that he didn't have the votes to pass it, and so he was not able to push that, knowing before the election, if this came out, what kind of a tax increase this would be on the American people. And so he waited until after the election, and that's what we heard yesterday. Now, some of the things he said just, you know, were a little bit insulting, but I can handle that. He said, the patience for anyone who denies that this problem is real. Now, he's talking about global warming. He's trying to revive global warming. Now, when I say revive, that's kind of interesting because it started out 12 years ago Global warming. Remember Kyoto, Mr. President? That's what it was all about. Down the Kyoto Treaty. And in fact, the Kyoto Treaty, they came back from Rio de Janeiro, and it was never submitted by Bill Clinton to the United States Senate for ratification. And the reason was the votes weren't there. And so time went by, and they decided, well, since it's not warming, and we want to keep this thing alive, and we want to do all we can to destroy CO2 in our society, let's call it something else. So they call it climate change. And a few other titles came in the meantime. Well, for the first time, it's now reverted back after several years to global warming. Now, the statement that he said was, we don't have time for a meeting with the Flat Earth Society. Sticking your head in the sand might make you feel safer, but it's not going to protect you from the coming storm. The 12 warmest years in recorded history have all come in the last 15 years. Last year, temperatures in some areas of the ocean reached record highs, and ice in the Arctic sank to its smallest size on record, faster than most models had predicted it would. These are the facts. Those aren't the facts, Mr. President. It's not even true. And it's interesting that we would be trying to revive this. I know there are a lot of people all excited out there who have said, well, for the last 4 years, we haven't said anything about global warming. Now we're talking about it. Now something's going to be done. I would like to suggest that in The Economist, I'm going to quote this from The Economist, said over the past 15 years, air temperatures at the Earth's surface have been flat, while greenhouse gas emissions have continued to soar. The world added roughly 100 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere between 2000 and 2010. That is about a quarter of all the CO2 put there by humanity since 1715. Of course, we know that's true because we know that the major surge came in the 1940s following World War II. It goes on, still quoting, and yet, as James Hansen, of course, was the head of the NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, as he observed, and he's one of the major movers behind this whole thing, the global warming movement, he said, the 5-year mean global temperature has been flat for a decade. Well, this is a guy on the other side who has always been held up to be the authentic, knowledgeable person. NASA, the Goddard paper from January of this year, quote, the 5-year mean global temperature has been flat for a decade, which we interpret as a combination of natural variability and a slowdown in the growth rate of the net climate forcing. Reuters, April of 2013. Scientists are struggling to explain a slowdown in climate change that has exposed gaps to their understanding and defies a rise in global greenhouse gas emissions. Some experts say, still quoting from Reuters, experts say their trust in climate science has declined because of the many uncertainties. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had to correct the 2007 report that exaggerated the pace of melt in the Himalaya glaciers and wrongly said that they could all vanish by 2035. All that sounded good at the time. It was a lie. And still quoting here, my own confidence in the data has gone down in the past 5 years. And that's quoting Richard Toll, an expert in climate change and a professor of economics at the University of Sussex in England. Now, I could go on, and yesterday on the floor I talked about Richard Lindzen. Richard Lindzen with MIT is considered by many people to be the foremost authority on climate anywhere in the country. And he's talking about what the motive is behind people to promote this thing, and said that it's a controlling CO2 is, I'm going from memory now, is a bureaucrat's dream. If you control climate, you control life. And that's exactly what we were talking about at that time. And it was true. We've covered all these things. And as I said, for several years now, people understand that the science isn't there. I can remember, and some people, my Republican friends, got upset with me because I've often said good things about Lisa Jackson. Lisa Jackson was the first director of the EPA under President Obama. And she is, of course, she's a liberal and all of that. but she has a propensity for telling the truth. And this is all I ask for in people who are serving in public office. And she, in fact, has done that. And I want to share one thing with you. When they are unable to pass any kind of cap and trade. Now, keep in mind, the last time they tried to do it was the bill that was introduced by 2 House members, one of whom was elected to the Senate yesterday. In this cap and trade bill, people realized the size of the tax increase it would be, and it went down in flames. So when the big UN party, by the way, when I talked about the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, that's something a lot of people don't know about, that's really the United Nations. They're the ones who put that together to fortify their position that we need to do something about the fact to equalize the wealth of nations worldwide. And in fact, I wrote a book about that I won't ask you to buy it because that would be inappropriate, but I'll loan it to you if you want to read it. And we cover that in a lot of detail. But in this, I asked Lisa Jackson the question, right before going to Copenhagen. Now, what is Copenhagen? Every year, the biggest party of the year happens to be, and I would pay,
would the senator yield just for a second? And I hate to interrupt you. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I'll buy your book. Can I have 1 minute, and I'll take no more than that, to say something about our departing colleague, because I may not be able to get back. Literally 1 minute.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Senator Inhofe. I would just like to say to Senator Cohen, Mo, from Massachusetts, I haven't known you very long, but I have found you to be someone who has been, quite frankly, very earnest in their time in the Senate, very smart, and a lot of fun. We got to travel to Egypt, to Turkey, to Israel, to see some of the more dangerous places in the world. And I just want to let the people of Massachusetts know that I met a lot of colleagues in my time here, but this is one fine man. I wish you all the best. I've learned a lot from you. I know you're originally from North Carolina. That's probably why we hit it off. I've learned a lot, but I've laughed a lot. You're a fine man, and we wish you well, and I hope that maybe public service is in your future. But whatever you do, I know you would do it well, and Godspeed.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just say kind of the same thing here. I had occasion to research Senator Cohen. I do this because one of the things I enjoy doing every Wednesday morning when we have our prayer breakfast is introducing those who were speaking. He was speaking. And when you research someone like him and you find for everyone, and I wonder, are you sure you're in the right place here? I have to question that. But I hold you in the highest regard, and I've hours after that, ClimateGate came in, and they were exposed for lies science for all those years. And so the timing could not have been better. I would only say that I'm glad that this issue is opened up again, because I had a dusty old file on climate change. We're ready to use it again. And I will look at the speech that was made by the President yesterday for actually what it is. Let's keep in mind, anytime we want to go into the extreme position of saying that CO2 is the cause of climate change or of global warming, keep in mind the cost of this. We're talking about a tax increase to the American people. One of the senators stood up after I said this yesterday and said, well, there's no evidence of that. Yes, that was the Wharton School of Economics and MIT that came out with those figures. So the last thing I'll say, and I'm going from memory on this, you know, God is still up there, and climate's going to change, and it has. And I can remember just studying this, and I'm going from memory now, I'm not reading anything, but I can remember that when I read about that we're all going to die because the world's going to freeze over, that was in 1895. In 1895, they talked about this disaster. So it got warmer, and that's when global warming interesting thing about CO2 in our country's, but another cooling period, which lasted to 1975, and then of course another and perhaps a warming period. Here in this country, to look at God's side and say something to change that, because we can't. To make it better. With that, I yield.
Yeah. For the benefit of the majority, the only in the record. Disposed of. 9 roll call. Gang of 8, you know, that makes it laughable. Our side has been asking for votes. We've tried to call up amendments. Last night we sent a list of 34 amendments over to the majority and requested votes on them. I'm told that they've refused that list, and I think it's because there's some tough votes in those amendments. They want to limit the number of amendments that can be considered. They want to choose the amendments, so in a sense they want to tell Republicans which amendments we can offer from our side. That's not right. I'm very disappointed, not just for myself, but for a lot of other members of the body. There's no deliberation. It seems as though there's no path forward to have votes to make the bill better. And of course, this isn't the way to legislate. Immigration reform is an important matter. We have to get it right. We shouldn't just rush a bill just to get it done, especially if we're going to pass a bad bill. This bill shouldn't be rushed if we're getting it wrong, and we have to get it right. So it's unfortunate that what has happened on the floor of the Senate, 9 roll call votes out of 550 amendments and counting that have been filed, so much for the world's greatest deliberative body. Immigration reform hasn't been debated on this floor since 2007, and as far as I can remember, a major piece of legislation like this in immigration hasn't passed the Senate since 1986. It may seem that we've been on the bill for a long time. Compared to a lot of other issues, it has been a longer time, but most of the time has been spent delaying actual debate and consideration of amendments while members craft a grand bargain compromise behind closed doors. And of course, as you know, that's been adopted at this point in the process. Unfortunately, it appears that this bill has been pre-cooked, deals have been made, and apparently having an open debate on amendments to the bill isn't part of that deal, particularly on many more than the few amendments that we have discussed, particularly those amendments that could substantively change the underlying bill for the better. So we get the impression that, sorry, the kitchen's closed. What's happened? We're supposed to be the most deliberative body in the world. We pride ourselves about that. But now we're going to rely on the House of Representatives to do our job, to be deliberative, and to fix this legislation. And I have great hopes that when this process is done through conference, that I can vote for a bill that will go to the President of the United States. As I've said before, the Judiciary Committee markup of this bill was full and open. And I have complimented Chairman Leahy many times on that point. It's just too bad that that process couldn't have been carried out here on the floor of the Senate. Whether members were pleased in committee with the vote results for their amendments. In committee, the members at least had the opportunity to offer amendments for debate and consideration. Amendments were debated, amendments were voted on. But that hasn't been the case in the last 2.5 weeks here on the Senate floor. We've tried to offer amendments to this over 1,000-page long bill. The majority is shutting us out. They've gotten the votes that they need to pass this bill through members getting their favorite amendments into the bill. And some of these seem to me to be special interest provisions. And some of them tend to be like the corn husker kickback sweeteners of Obama care fame. And now we're getting the door to the shop closed. It's important for the public to know that we've tried to make this bill better by trying to offer amendments. We've given the other side a list, and I think it's been flatly refused. It's not too much to ask for this number of amendments to be considered. That list had 34 amendments. That's 34 amendments out of 550 filed. Senators would like to see a lot more amendments considered and voted on, but we've limited the number to 34. I end my remarks by asking UC to put that list of amendments that we ask the majority to consider before final passage to be placed in the record. I yield the floor.
Sir, Mr. President, is there objection?